I never turned on the hair light. Turn that on. Good, I'm glad halfway through this video, I'll be separated better from the background than I was in the first half. Always check that everything's on before you start filming a video. Hey, I'm Brian Miller, magician and motivational speaker, and welcome to Brian Miller Magic on YouTube, where we do inspiration tips and tutorials for creative people like you and me. And in this video, we're doing an update to a video I did about a year ago, the Canon M3 vlog settings tutorial. It was basically a comprehensive tutorial on how to get started vlogging with the Canon M3 or similar cameras, and I've been getting a lot of requests in the comments and in social media to do an update to that video with the Canon M6. As most of you know who follow the channel, I upgraded to the M6 a few months ago, kind of late to the game. So at any point during this video, you can go to the YouTube description and check out chapter links for specific things you may have questions on. If you are not new to the camera completely, you may just be looking for one thing that should be in the links below. That ought to help you out. But if you're completely new to vlogging, you might want to watch this from start to finish. It'll really help you out getting off the ground. All right, first things first, we got to turn on the camera. So flick the switch right here to turn it on, and then make sure that your dial is set to movie mode, which is this one right here that looks like a movie camera. And on the very first screen when you pull up your menu, you'll see record mode. Let's ignore that for right now. Image quality, that's for photos, ignore that for right now. Shooting information display. Go into shooting information display. You're definitely going to want to turn on your grid display, your 3x3 grid. That's going to help you line up your shots. Histogram, if you're new to vlogging, don't worry about it all. If you're not new to vlogging or if you're not new to cameras, I have mine set to brightness and I have it for a small display size right there. If you head up here to screen info and toggle settings, you'll actually be able to choose what you have on each screen. So let's take a look at our first screen here. Go into info and choose all of them. I like everything on my first screen. I like to have the information about what I'm shooting. I like to have the histogram to check my exposure as best I can. I like having the grid display, and I always like the electronic level so I can make sure that my shots are level, especially when using a GorillaPod where you don't have a level built into it. Then you can pretty much do whatever you want for the next few displays. The next display, I have just the grid and the level. The next display, I have nothing on it whatsoever. And lastly, you have your quick control. Back into the menu. Reverse display on. That's going to make sure that when you have the screen flipped up and you're looking at it, that it looks normal to you. If you don't turn on the reverse display, when you move left, you'll watch yourself move right in the screen and it'll completely throw you off. It's a nightmare if you don't have that on. All right, let's over here to the second menu. Let's see, image review doesn't matter for video. Quick setting menu layout, let's ignore that for now. Over here to third, AF method. That is your autofocus method. You are pretty much always going to want this on face detection and tracking, which is the first one here. You see you have two other options, smooth zone autofocus and 1-point autofocus. And you're going to want to turn your focus mode onto AF auto. Over here onto the fourth one, go up to your manual focus peaking settings, turn peaking on, turn your level to high, and you can make your color any one you like. I find that blue is the easiest for my eyes to see. What your manual focus peaking settings are going to do is that if you're in manual focus instead of autofocus, it's going to illuminate around the edges of what's in focus in whatever color you tell it to. It's so helpful to have that on this system because you don't have an EVF, right? You don't have a viewfinder. The manual focus rings on the EFM lenses, they don't stop ever. So you just keep turning and turning and turning. It's really helpful for eyeing up your manual focus. All right, IS settings, image stabilization settings. Go in and turn your IS mode to continuous, then go into digital IS and you're going to choose enable. Now you have three options here. Disable, so completely no digital image stabilization. Enable, which is your kind of average image stabilization. And enhanced, which is really a lot of image stabilization. You'll find that if you disable your image stabilization, it is going to be a little too shaky when you're walking around and vlogging. If you go to enhanced, it's going to get a little warpy. Over here to ISO speed. ISO is your digital brightness level. It's the amount of digital gain that your camera is able to brighten or darken the image, but it's doing it digitally, not optically. So when you crank up your ISO, you do get a brighter image, but you also get a lot more noise, a lot of grain in the image. So it's something you have to be, you have to balance, right? You have to balance between how bright do you want. If you're in a darker setting, or if you have a darker lens that doesn't open up very wide and you're trying to get a brighter image, you can crank up that ISO. Come in here and set your ISO speed for now to auto. We're gonna talk more about how to run that manually later in the video. And ISO auto, set your max to 3200. What that means is when you have your ISO set to auto, the max it'll automatically go to, that it'll go to on its own, is 3200. Now you can set it to 6400 and really brighten things up, but it's for me 6400 on this, even on the M6, it's just too grainy, it's too noisy. I'd rather it be a little bit darker at 3200. I really need to put some sticky feet on the bottom of the legs of this table because it always slides away from me during these tutorial sessions. Here we go, white balance. For now you're gonna set that to AWB, auto white balance. We will go over more about that later. Don't worry about your custom white balance correction, picture style. Picture style we're going to talk about more in depth. For right now, you can go in and set it to either auto or standard. Those are two popular options. They both look great. They will get you off and running with no problem. A little bit later, we're gonna talk about my custom neutral picture profile. Here we go, drive mode, self-timer. Those are both for photography. Movie record size, set it to FHD 23.98p. That is standard high definition 24 frames per second. In other words, 1080p at 24 frames per second. 24 frames per second is the cinematic standard. Virtually I never turned on the hair light. This is the second time that I have tried to film this tutorial. 24 frames per second is the cinematic standard, so anytime you see a movie, virtually every movie, almost, not all, but almost every movie you've ever seen was shot in 24 frames per second. It just looks right. It looks like we see the world. If you do 30 frames per second, which a lot of YouTubers do, or at least they do by default, if you just get into YouTubing, you'll notice that looks a little bit too smooth. It's the soap opera look. If you watch soap operas on TV, most of them were shot and filmed in 30 frames per second, just a little slick. All right, sound recording. Now this is hotly debated. I do all of my audio in manual, but if you are new to vlogging, just go over here, go to auto, you will be good to go. If you're going to put it in auto mode, go to your wind filter, go to your attenuator, and turn that also to auto. Attenuator means it will drop the level of your audio if it hears that there's a really loud noise. Like if you're at a rock concert or a really loud crowd, the attenuator, if you have it set to auto, will automatically drop the incoming, the input signal of the microphone. But if you care about your audio, if you really care about your audio, you're gonna set it to manual. And then hopefully you're also using an external microphone. If you care about your audio, if you're gonna go manual, you may as well be using an external microphone. If you're using the internal mics, just set it to auto. It's already not gonna sound great, so just set it to auto, you'll be fine, and later come revisit the idea of getting an external mic. If you have an external mic, and by the way, if you wanna be able to set up an external microphone with one of the Canon M3, M6, all the ones that have the flip up screen like this, you obviously can't put a microphone here and flip up the screen and see yourself at the same time. They would block each other. I've got a great solution for you, which you're looking at right here. You can go to this video. It's one of the most popular solutions, I think, on YouTube for using an external microphone with the Canon M series. If you're using an external microphone, you set your sound recording to manual, go to your record level. Now here's the thing, you're gonna have to play with this on your own. Go to your record level and you're going to watch the lines pegging along here as you're talking. And you're going to want to set the record level so that it's peaking between -9 and -12 decibels. If you don't know what that means, I'm going to leave a link in the description where I did an entire video just on how to properly set your incoming audio levels. Come down here to Movie Servo AF, turn that on. Using an external microphone, yeah, Movie Servo AF, it just means that it's going to be continuously doing autofocus, during video, and that's why it gives you that warning here that says using an external microphone will reduce the amount of lens drive noise recorded, because if you're using the internal microphones and your camera is constantly doing autofocus, that little drive inside the camera, that whirring, will be picked up by the microphones in the camera. Using an external microphone will almost completely eliminate that noise. Okay, autofocus with shutter button during filming. Yes, turn that on. That just means that if you are filming, if you're actually recording, and you notice that it's not quite autofocusing the way you want it to or fast enough, you can hold down the shutter button and it will immediately autofocus. Come over here now into your settings, not the camera settings, but just like the menu settings here. Create folder daily. You're a vlogger. You want to make sure that when you take out your SD card, pop it into your computer, that all the files are organized by day, not by month, or you will lose your mind. File numbering, continuous. Format, that is for when you need to reformat your SD card. Don't do that unless you want to erase everything on your SD card. Video system, NTSC, if you are in the States, and I don't know off the top of my head what other regions use NTSC. You're gonna wanna check if you are in a part of the world that uses the PAL system, the PAL, I think it's just pronounced PAL. You're gonna wanna go check what part of the world you're in, and you'll just Google NTSC or PAL and then whatever country you're in, and it'll tell you right away which one of these you need to be. You can go into your electronic level and you can calibrate it here. Those are all of the main functions that you're going to want to do to get off and running. Okay, if you are brand new to vlogging and you don't know anything about cameras, you're going to want to go into your movie mode, set it to auto. This first one right here is auto movie mode. That will determine all of the settings for you, and if you've gone into your menu and you've taken care of the IS and the AF and all that stuff that we already did, that's it. Just put it in auto mode, hit record, you're off and running, you'll be very happy. But if you want more control over everything, you're gonna come in here and go to movie manual exposure. Now that we're in manual exposure, we need to talk about the exposure triangle. The exposure triangle. So the first part of the exposure triangle that matters is the shutter speed, and this is really easy. The 180-degree shutter rule says that your shutter speed should always be twice your frame rate. So if we're filming in 24 frames per second, our shutter speed should be 1/48. Now, if you're using a consumer camera like the M6, the M3, anything like this, it's not a professional grade movie camera, cinematic camera, you're not gonna have the 1/48th option, so choose the closest to that, which is 1/50th. So filming in 24 frames per second, 1/50th shutter speed, lock it down, that's it, you never change it for any reason. And the reason that that matters is that the 180-degree shutter rule makes sure that the amount of motion blur that you see, like the blurring when something's moving quickly, looks natural to the human eye. If you slow down your shutter speed, it's going to get way too blurry, and if you speed up your shutter speed, it's going to look really choppy and kind of anxious. So your shutter speed should always be twice your frame rate, which means if you're filming at a higher frame rate, like 30 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1/60th. And if you are filming in 60 frames per second to do slow motion B-roll, then you should be shooting in 1/125th. 1/125th. Ideally, you would be shooting in 1/120th, but again, consumer cameras don't have that option, whereas professional grade movie cameras do. Here's what you need to know. Your aperture is measured by f-stops. Right? There's an F number, and if you have the kit lens, you'll see it's got like f3.5. If you have the 11-22, it's f4. The lower the F number, the brighter the image, the more background blur. The higher the F number, the darker the image, and the more everything stays in focus. ISO is the digital brightness, as I mentioned earlier. So as you stop down from, say, 3.5 in your kit lens to 5.6 or to 8 or to 11 or to 16, if you need to keep more stuff in focus and you're stopping down, then you also need to boost your ISO, the digital brightness, to keep the exposure, to keep the overall scene as bright as you want it. Okay, here's my advice. You've got your shutter speed at 1/50th, locked and never changes. You've got your aperture set for indoor scenes, anything indoors, and a lot of vlogging is indoors. You've always got your aperture as low an F number as your lens will allow. So if I'm on the 11-22, I've got it at f4. If I'm on the 18-55 or the 15-45, I've got it at f3.5. And then you put your ISO on auto. Hit up on the wheel to get to your ISO, and you can change it as you see, and you're going to change it to auto. That means that when you are vlogging, when you're running in and out of different rooms that have different brightnesses, there's a window in this room but not in the next room, everything will stay locked and the only variable is your ISO. So your camera will adjust the digital brightness to accommodate for the room. Now, you'll find that if you go outside, often you're going to need to stop down your aperture, because even 3.5 or 4, which are pretty dark indoors, are not nearly dark enough outside. Okay, so as you can see, I am outside. The sun is right here, and even on a relatively dark f4 setting, which inside was way too dark, with ISO 100, this is way too bright. So let's stop down to f8. All right, f8, it's still blowing out the background and a little bit of my face, so let's come down to f11. Still a little blown out in the background, but my face is pretty good at this point. If I didn't want anything to be blown out, I might need to go down to f16. There we go. Now the background is not blown out, but my face is a little dark. So as you can see, you need to play around with that a little bit. So you'll find that outside, even if you have your ISO at 100, which is the least amount of digital brightness that you can add, it's still gonna be way too bright. Your image is gonna just blow out. Now your other option is to put an ND filter on the lens. We're not going to talk about that in this video, but you can Google or YouTube ND filter to find out what it does. Essentially, it's like sunglasses for your camera. There you go, 1/50th. Keep your aperture as low as it goes indoors, stop it down when you need to outdoors, and leave your ISO on auto. The only time that I would not have my ISO on auto is when I'm doing a video like this, a studio shoot or a talking head segment, like if I'm doing a vlog and I'm in an airport and I set the camera down, I'm going to monologue to it for 2 or 3 minutes, I'll manually set everything so nothing changes in the middle of filming. All right, let's take a look at some of the other settings. Your white balance. Again, I said you can have auto white balance for regular vlogging. This is especially ideal if you're running and gunning. Again, if you're doing a studio shoot or an extended talking head segment, you might want to manually select your white balance. I have found that these cameras are prone to the white balance shifting slowly over the course of a long scene. So I do lock down my white balance when I have an extended segment or a studio shoot. Now the picture style, the picture profile. I'm not going to talk too much about this in this video because I've done entire video. I did an entire video on Canon picture styles. I set my picture profile to a custom neutral, and the reason that I do that is I like to color correct and color grade. A lot of vloggers, they don't want to do that. They don't have time. They don't have time to do that. They're editing, filming, editing, uploading every day, and they just want to set it to auto or standard or faithful. Any of those picture profiles will be great. As you know already, I do everything in manual, so I want complete control. So I go to the, let's see, the user profile 1, and here is how I set my custom neutral. 0 for the sharpness strength, 2 for sharpness fineness, 2 for sharpness threshold. I add sharpness in post. This is just a tiny little bit, so I don't have to go crazy in post, but I add most of my sharpness in post. Contrast, I have it all the way off. I'm going to add contrast in post. I want control over that, so it's at -4. Saturation, I leave my saturation at 0. I don't add it, I don't take away. You'll find that saturation is one of the things you actually can manipulate in post no matter what you do in camera. Even if you had it completely desaturated, you can add tons of it back in post. All of it, you can bring it back. If you have it totally oversaturated in the camera, you can pull it back in post. And color tone, I have mine set to 0, set at its neutral setting. It does well for my face, but if you're have a slightly different color tone to your face, you might want to go in here and go a little left or a little right to make it more yellow or more red. Lastly, if you're filming B-roll, now I'm not going to do a training session on how to shoot slow motion in this video. Real quick, if you're shooting B-roll, you're going to want to go in here, change your movie record size all the way up to FHD 59.94p. That is 1080p at 60 frames per second. And then you're going to need to change your shutter speed to 1/125th. So once you've done that, you will be able to shoot your B-roll and then slow it down in post later to as far as 40% without degrading the image at all. That's how I get all my B-roll. All right, I think that we covered all of the major settings that you would need to get off the ground vlogging or to improve the quality of your vlogs by getting more manual control if you've been vlogging for a while. The Canon M6 is a phenomenal vlogging camera. Of course, the only real issue with it is that you can't put the external mic on top without running into it with the screen. Every single other video I've done about the different things we talked about, more in depth, I'm putting links in the description of this video. I really hope that this was helpful. So if you did enjoy this, please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Any questions you have about cameras or audio or editing or vlogging, tips, tricks, tutorials, mindset, philosophy, put them in the comments. I love to engage and connect with people. Thank you very much, and always remember that our world is a shared experience. Have a great day.